I'll leave that for now. So what is a portfolio? So essentially every medic has one. It's made up of your medical degree and a list of completed activities that are then used to demonstrate your competency and skills you will have developed over the years. And it's mostly in non-clinical areas. So these can include, but not limited to audits, quips, publications, awards, teaching evidence, exams, courses, and presentations. So that essentially is your portfolio. And now, in my view, I see our portfolio more as a guided medical CV. And why is that? Well, every specialty wants slightly different completed activities, and they state this on one important document called the self-assessment. It's an extremely important document, and it is essential to guide what activities we should all focus on. And each specialty, like I said, has their own self-assessment that is tailored to specific activities, um, like the CV is tailored to specific jobs that people apply for. And now portfolios are used alongside exams to distinguish you from other candidates at certain specialty application stages. So yes, they are not the be all and end all when it comes to applying, because exams do play a factor, but they are very important. And depending on what training pathway you want to go into, you may have to prepare your portfolio more than once. So let's have a look at a self-assessment form, and then we'll look at training pathways to better visualize this. So the self-assessment form, that should be here. So, okay, yeah. So the self-assessment, so like I said, um, I see our portfolios as a guided kind of CV, and the guide is a self-assessment itself. And like I said, every specialty has one, and it's usually how your portfolio will be. And the self-assessment talks about how your portfolio will be assessed when we apply for training posts. And they are made up of different domains, such as commitment to specialty, audits, teaching, and publications. And they are very well detailed, and they say exactly what they want from you, and arguably just as important, how they want this evidence from you. And where can you find a self-assessment form? Um, I usually Google self-assessment and the specialty that you want to look at. For example, you can type in on Google general surgery self-assessment, and it's usually the first PDF that comes up. And they are also all on the Health Education England national recruitment website. There's also a list of competition ratios on there too for every specialty, which is very interesting to look at and compare over the years. But anyway, let's take a look at a self-assessment form now. So this is the core surgical training self-assessment form. So like I said, it's used as a guide um, for us to complete certain activities. Um, these are the four domains. So commitment to specialty, quips, audits, presentations, publications, and teaching experiences or teaching experience. So we can just have a quick look through now. So like I said, each specialty is very different. This is a surgical self-assessment. So it does include, involvement with cases. The more the better. Surgical conferences, surgical electives or rotations in surgery will get you more points as well. In terms of quips, audits, so yes, these can get you, so if you've led an audit that's surgically themed, these can get you more points as well. And the reason why it's so important to look through this self-assessment is because it does change year on year. For example, the audit being surgically themed was only added in, I think, maybe 2 years ago. Whereas prior to that, you could lead any kind of audit as long as you were the lead, you would get full points. However, they've changed that about 2 years ago, so it's definitely worth checking every year and just staying updated with these. Teaching experience and other kind of qualifications. Okay, so do you need everything on this list? Do you need everything? Do you need everything on this list? No, but getting as much as possible helps, as we've just seen on the self-assessment. My advice is um, going to get a little bit deep here, but I would personally only look at the points you can influence and focus on, and I'll definitely focus on maximizing these rather than dwelling on the points that you have less control over. For example, if you have an intercalated degree, that's amazing. But if you haven't, then it's important to disregard those marks and just utilize your energy on getting points from elsewhere. I mean, another example is the presentation section on here. Let me just find it. So I think it says, so I think, yeah, so it says here the maximum number of points is given if a candidate is a first author for a PubMed publication. However, if a candidate isn't able to achieve this, then it's also fine, and it's best to focus on maybe getting a case report, which is, yes, will only get you 4 points compared to the 10 points, but it is a lot quicker, and might actually allow the candidate to achieve more points overall from elsewhere by using their free time gained from completing a shorter case report, as they're usually much more quicker to complete. So you could use that time saved to try and complete an audit as the lead, and then go on to present that audit nationally, or from using the time saved from doing a shorter case report rather than being a first author. I hope that makes sense. So essentially, my takeaway from this slide is not to be disheartened when you first take a look at the self-assessment and think, oh my days, I can't get max points in all of these sections. Is it worth me applying? Because yes, it is. And during my first rotation in Gen Surg, I was speaking to a colorectal surgeon, and he was saying most of the applicants that he gets don't have maximum points in all of the sections anyway. And most of them don't have max points in any one section anyway. So it's perfectly okay to not have maximum points. So just don't be disheartened when you look at these self-assessment areas. And personally, I imagine it's probably best to have some points in most sections compared to having maximum points in 2 or 3 sections with none in the remaining sections. Right, so let's have a look. So let's have a look at when these portfolios are looked at during our training pathways. Right, so in medicine, there are many training pathways, and this is a basic pathway structure that covers most specialties, but not all. So most of you are here in uni at the moment, and the first time your fully independent portfolio will get assessed is usually here after your foundation years. So it's assessed as you apply for CT1 or ST1 training, and is usually assessed sometimes again during your ST3 applications. And now I say sometimes because few specialties are run through training programs such as pediatrics and maybe neurosurgery, from what I remember, which means that your portfolio will only get assessed at this stage here, and you're usually okay up until the point you want to CCT, but that's another conversation and presentation in itself, and I'm definitely not qualified to give at the moment. So yes, it's just to bear in mind that some training pathways are what we call run through. So as soon as you're on that training pathway, you just stay on that training pathway, and you don't need to reapply, as you would compared to other specialties like surgery or anesthetics, where you would usually apply at an ST3 or ST4 stage. Oh, and it's usually important to note that the self-assessment for let's call it a CT1 stage, and the self-assessment PDF for the ST3 stages are very different. For example, in anesthetics, they differ quite a lot. So it's definitely worth just taking note of that. So once you are in the CT1 and CT2 stage, it's definitely worth looking at the ST3 self-assessment form and tailoring your non-clinical activities towards that self-assessment form. So it's competition. So first person to shout 10 gets £10,000.
10.
Okay, lovely. Nice, well done. Let me just increase the fine print. One second. Yeah, there we go. So unfortunately, it was just a little too late. So essentially, the competition is closed. This just takes me to my next point of always read the fine print. It is so important because you don't want to lose. You wouldn't want to lose half of your summer like I did at the end of med school, but I'll go into that in a second. So essentially, on the self-assessment, I'm always read the fine print because it can be almost as important as the self-assessment form itself. And why is this? It's because past participants that I've spoken to have generally lost out on marks entirely because the self-assessment form also talks about how they want you to evidence what you've done. And they usually want you to evidence this in a specific way. And some people have missed out on this because they haven't evidenced their proof of activities correctly, or they might have done this by missing out dates. So for example, I remember back when I wanted to do surgery in medical school, I was logging surgeries into my e-logbook. That's just a logbook that states what surgeries you've been to, and just entering all the surgeries that you managed to kind of scrub into. And to have this as evidence, you have to print it out and ask one of the consultant surgeons to sign it with their full name, GMC number, and the date of when the consultant signed the printed logbook. And when I was in placement, I heard previous participants lost out because they either didn't get the consultant to sign the e-logbook completely or forgot to ask the consultant to add their GMC number, for example. So it does happen. And just don't let it happen to you. So always read the fine print on the self-assessment. So if you do take anything away from the slide, it's when you're gathering all of the evidence or completing activities, such as the audits, presentations, make sure you read how they want you to evidence this, i.e. the small print. So back into my last year of summer, essentially I'm saying this to you guys so you don't make the same mistake that I did and lose out on your summer. It was just before the long break after my final year of med school. I remember feeling torn between two specialties, one of which was TNO. As I enjoyed the placement, it was very interesting. So during my last ever summer as a student, I decided to prepare for the TNO core surgical training application, which involved participating in as much surgeries as we saw earlier on the self-assessment. So I did this by trying to scrub into as many surgeries as I could over the next 2 weeks or so. And so I did that just so it will take a lot of the stress and burden away from me having to try and reach 40 cases during my F1 and F2 years. So 2 weeks have gone past now, and bear in mind I'm in the southwest of England in uni. I'm not at home in summer, enjoying summer with my friends in London. And I finally sit down after the 2 weeks with the TNO consultant to have him sign off my printed e-logbook. He then tells me he then tells me the cases only count when you're on F1. So cases that I've witnessed only count as an F1 and not as a medical student, or F1 or above, and not as a medical student. So I was absolutely shocked. I literally couldn't believe I'd wasted the last, week or so of my time during my last summer doing something I want to get points for. So yeah, just don't do what I did and not read the small print and lose your summer. However, the silver lining is I changed my mind back away from surgery. And also, it wasn't true. There was no such statement on the core surgical self-assessment stating that you had to be an F1 or above. But it still highlights the importance of always reading the small print because I hadn't have done that. So it could have been true. So when you're preparing for your self-assessment, um, um, so like I said, there are differences between specialties. However, this doesn't mean that you can't work with other F1s or other kind of people that are interested in different specialties. For example, I did a teaching program with a friend of mine in F1, and especially he was interested in wanted his evidence letter to add the dates of the teaching sessions, whereas mine didn't require that. The consultant was happy to sign two evidence letters with different wordings, and that is usually the case. The consultants are usually happy to sign two different letters. So don't let the fact that you and someone that you work well with or get along well with can't work on the same tasks together for the self-assessments, because the consultants are usually happy to sign multiple letters. And my absolute top tip regarding this is prep the letter yourself in the format that you want, i.e., you can make sure the format has the GMC, date, full name, and spaces for these entries, so nothing in the evidence fine print is missed. So I guess it can wait, right? So when to start working on the self-assessment? So, oh, I can't do that. Okay, so I was going to ask, I was going to ask you guys when you feel the right time is to work on the self-assessment, but I've clicked it now, so it's fine. So, essentially, the best time is now. And the reason is because even if you are unsure about what specialty you want to do, or you're not 100% sure and you're torn between two or three, completing audits and quips, etc., will still give you immense benefits as you get to learn about the logistics of an audit, what works, what doesn't work, what will help you in future. And this will help you in future audits. And also sometimes an audit in one specialty might actually be able to be carried over to other specialties, such as surgery and anesthetics. If you were doing an audit in anesthetics, um, some of them can be carried over into surgery because it is related. The audit might be related to a surgically themed audit. And also networking whilst you're completing these projects and audits is never a bad thing. So if a person was to change their mind from one specialty to another, some really good supervisors will sometimes know another doctor in that other field of interest. So my advice regarding this is after today would definitely be to look at your most desired specialty self-assessment and start identifying things that you can tick off and work towards them, and do that at the best time, which is now. And I would encourage you to take steps now and pivot later as needed. And this is what I wish someone explained to me back in my early years of med school. So yes. Okay, now on to top tips for shift work and a little bit as to um, life as an F1. If you guys have any questions about the self-assessment, my email is at the end of this presentation as well. Okay, so life as an F1 is good, full of ups and downs. The downs are mainly night shifts, but the good thing is there are many things you can do to make the night shifts a lot more tolerable. So, like I was talking about earlier, meal prep is absolutely essential. They will be your best friend during your nights, because more likely than not, you will not have time to meal prep during your string of on-calls. Each shift, well, each on-call shift tends to be 12 and a half hours long. So, if you, in a 24-hour day, if you work for 12 and a half hours, with the commute being roughly, I don't know, 45 minutes, you're not left with a lot of time after you factor sleep and um, other activities in your day to kind of meal prep in between your shifts. So meal prepping before your string of shifts is definitely a good idea. And it's definitely a good idea to start as soon as possible, which is what I wish I did, rather than continuously lying to myself during my on calls that I have time to cook in between, because I really did not. Um, Another top tip for preparing for on-call shifts is definitely sleep. For night shifts, if you don't have eye masks and blackout curtains, I would say get on Amazon and get some now, because they will literally be the difference between feeling awake on your fourth or third night shift or feeling like you're about to knock out at any second. Um, you definitely want to avoid running on no sleep, caffeine, and just vibes. Trust me, I'm talking from experience. And blue light glasses are optional, but they're definitely a good shout to wear after night shifts. Time management is important. Just try, but in terms of not the generic time management, although that is important, but time management in terms of trying not to plan too many activities in between your on calls, and instead plan them for the end of your on calls, especially during night shifts, as it will give you something to look forward to. So it kind of will keep you going, halfway through your nights. You definitely don't want to kind of plan any kind of important I don't know, maybe GP appointments or I don't know, interviews or meetings during your on calls. And just to round off the presentation, useful resources I definitely recommend are these apps. The foundation has been invaluable to me on my first couple of nights because I literally started on night shifts as well. And foundation is very, very useful. It tells you what you need to know in regards to some acute kind of situations or when you've been asked to review patients on your way walking to review the patient. Um, you can type in a fall, for example, and the foundation will tell you a list of, investigations and things to consider, just to round everything in a just to help gather all the information that you think you'll need when going to review the patient. It's very useful. BMJ, Geeky Medics has been very useful, especially for death verifications and how to formally type this on the patient's notes. Um, and also, I'd definitely recommend this book for your medical clerking shifts, as it really helped me pre-prepare, pre-prepare for common presentations I'll see on the medical take shifts. Yeah, I'll move this out of the way. It's this book here, Medicine and Surgery. It's a very useful book. The layout is slightly different to typical textbooks, such as the Cheese and Onion book or the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine. Instead, it starts with um, presentations of patients and cases, and it goes through each case step by step. And I think it's one of the best ones that I've found for my ISKIs, ISKIs and OSKIs. So yeah, I definitely recommend that, or giving that little read or giving that little go before your medical take shifts. Um, so yes, thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I hope that was helpful. And if you do have any more questions, just feel free to send me an email or get in touch with the student reps.
Thank you very, very much. We're giving you virtual applause. We do have a few questions, one of which is, first of all, when you show the different self-assessments, they are asking whether one section is just one set of points or can you get multiple? So for example, if you've done like 3 audits, do you get the audit points? And if you've led an audit, do you also get do you also get the, let's say you ran it by yourself, points, or is it just solely one per thing you've done?
So what I understand is you can only use one piece of evidence for each section. So if you've done one audit, you can only use that for your audit section, and you can't use that also for your presentation. That's to my understanding. That's what I've been told.
No problem. And another question is there a place where you can get, for example, surgery audit ideas? So something like an audit bank?
I think there is one. Usually every department has a consultant who's an audit lead, and if you speak to one of the consultants, they'll be able to tell you who that person is. In terms of an audit bank, I know TNO did have something like that in the past, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But if they drop me an email, I can try and find out and send that to them.
And then another question, in terms of when it comes to swapping shifts, how easy is that for you?
Oh, that just depends if luck is on your side, to be honest. But usually most of the time there's a WhatsApp chat and you just drop a message there or drop multiple messages there, then eventually someone will be willing to swap. But saying that, during my acute internal medicine rotation, some of the rota leads were very understanding. So if there were enough people scheduled in for that night shift or long on-call day shift, they were able to swap that shift for you, even though nobody was swapping onto the day that you were doing originally, if that makes sense. So it really depends on the hospitals and the people that you're trying to swap with, really.
Okay. Those are all the questions we have. Thank you very much. Feel free for you to hang around. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask him. We also have another foundation here doctor here as well. So if you have questions, they can both answer it. We're now going to move on to the research section of this talk. We'll start off with Tiffany, and she'll introduce herself, and then we'll begin.
Well, so do you want to stay in?
I'm in.
Okay. So I'll introduce myself again. So it says Phoebe's name, but I'm Tiffany Bobbitt. I'm a current fourth year medical student at the Holyoke Medical School, currently based in the University of York. In terms of my experience and kind of what I'm going to be talking to you about for the next 10-15 minutes, when I was thinking about what to do this talk about, I was thinking about doing PowerPoint, but all the tips I wanted to give weren't really anything that you needed to write down, and they were more just kind of inspirational words per se, personal things I wanted to tell people, and kind of just the ways that I've gotten to where I am. When we're thinking about how I'm able to give this talk and what kind of publications I've had in the past, so currently I have 2 publications that are official and out there and in journals that people can feel free to read if they want. They're on frozen elephant trunk, which is a type of technique that we use in aortic heart surgery. If you're not interested, that's absolutely fine. But if you are interested, feel free to read it. So those are 2 publications that I have, and I currently have 3 that are currently waiting to be published by the journals. So in the next few months or so, I'll have about 5 publications out there. So I have a little bit of insight into what it is to do a bit of research as a student. I think my main thing and the main things that I wondered when I wanted to get into research, and also the main things that my friends asked me, is essentially how and how is it possible, and where do you kind of go about finding it. And in that sense, one of the reasons why I'm giving this talk in Mansag, one of the reasons I work for Mansag, is I feel like it's very well resonated with what it is to be Nigerian, in that we are always taught and told to be very proactive, to be very to use our initiative a lot and kind of take our chances. And that's the main things you need to know, especially as a student. So I can kind of give a couple of anecdotes and then how they have presented in me getting some actual research. So I went on to a ward because I had to, and I was talking to one of the consultants, and he was mentioning how he does a lot of surgery, and I just asked, could I see some? This was when I was in the very start of 3rd year, so I had no idea what I was doing. And I was very much just interested in seeing heart surgery because you always see it on TV and it looks really cool. So I had a look at it and I was asking lots of questions, partially because I had no idea what was going on, but also because I was very interested to know further and I really wanted to get involved as much as I could. So from asking all these questions, I asked if there was anything else that they did on the board. And he said, oh yeah, we occasionally do audits. And this was before I knew what it was, but I immediately said, can I do one? So I went home that day and obviously looked at what audits are. And from that conversation, from me wanting to do that audit, we started on this auditing process, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute, in case you don't know what an audit is. But we started on this auditing process, and once again, I would just always be firing him emails saying, I've done this bit of analysis, can you please help me look at this, do this, that, and the other. And then it started as an audit, which turned into a full-blown paper, which I am currently the first author of, once it gets published in the next few months. So that kind of anecdote is just to say that, honestly, the easiest way to get research as a student is to just go onto the wards, talk to a consultant, show that you're interested, and they will ride with that interest. And they're really, really keen to get students involved in research. More recently, quite similarly, something happened where I was talking to one of the consultants after a bedside teaching, and after it, she was asking us whether any of us were interested in paediatric because paediatric ward. And similarly, in the same light, she said, if anyone wants to get involved in any projects, just send me an email and she can see what she can do. So I feel, in my opinion, that a lot of students, when I talk to them and when they ask me questions, sometimes we are our own hurdle. We think that research is a lot harder to get into than it is. Or maybe I've just worked in really nice hospitals, I'm not sure. But from my experience and also the experience of those around who also do research, if you approach a consultant, they are usually really happy for you to get involved in any small way, and they'll always give whatever you give. So if you put in a lot of initiative, a lot of passion, then they will give you a lot of passion back. If you, not that I recommend it, but if you send them random emails at 4 in the morning showing that you're working on the project, they will also work out of hours with you to work on the project as well. In that light, I talked a little bit about it earlier in terms of the different types of research that we can have when we're thinking about our self-assessments. So really basically, they always change the rules, and essentially the overarching rule, which is always the case, is that you want to be as much as the first lead as you can, or as close to being the first lead as you can for various amounts of things, so that you're demonstrating a lot of interest in that field in different ways. So via audits, quips, papers, which can manifest as meta-analysis, systematic reviews, literature reviews, and things of that sort. When we're thinking about how to actually get involved in those and what those actually entail, what I always tell people is that the easiest things you can do are quips and audits. And I'll talk a little bit about what those are. So basically, a quip and an audit, in really, really simple terms, is you seeing a problem in a hospital and you saying, I've identified a problem, I have a solution, can I try out that solution and see where it takes me, and then see whether the problem has resolved or gotten a little bit better at least. That concept and that kind of idea is a quip and an audit. And I feel like as medical students, considering we spend so much time on the wards, we are very aware of some of the shortcomings. So when we're thinking of ideas for audits, that might be something along the lines of, if you've ever particularly been searching for a skill to do in your portfolios. So if you've ever been searching for a blood culture and then you finally got one and you realised, I've just done a culture, but my patient didn't get that antibiotic for an hour and a half. Obviously, that's not ideal. We want them to be getting them pretty soon after, if not immediately after we take their cultures. And that's something you've noticed that happened quite consistently in that ward or that department. Go up to one of the nurses, go up to one of the consultants. As I also said earlier, there's always going to be an audit lead. And go up to them, and it's always easier if you present them with a problem and say, of prescribing antibiotics after our blood cultures, and then say, I'm interested in doing an audit, or I'm interested in doing a quip, and then ask them how you could get involved. They would be more than happy to, for a variety of reasons. One, as I said, they really like working medical students, and they really like helping us. Two, a lot of hospitals get financial initiatives and financial incentives from the government if they help their statistics on certain things. So it's also in their benefit money-wise to do audits and things like that. So it's kind of a pro for both people. When we are thinking about the difference between audits and quips, and whether you're thinking about whether you want to do them, quips require you to think very, very practically about a solution. So, for instance, what was a quip that I did last year? Diabetes app. Yeah. So last year I did a quip about a diabetes app. So an app, so quite literally creating an app which would help people to monitor their food intake, and that would help with their diabetes progression and therefore kind of complications as a result of worsening diabetes. What did you do? Smoking and carrying, basically. So Phoebe also did one, but it's fine. So a quip is you actually kind of forming a project, and that project is going to improve the quality of something. So it's in the name, quality improvement project. You're actually creating some form of thing which is going to aid in creating a solution to the problem that you identify. When we're thinking about audits, it's quite literally you getting data, you seeing there's a problem, you thinking this might be a fix, and that's when you have an open loop audit. Ideally, with an audit, you'd want to close the loop as well. So after a year or so, if you're on that same placement site, for example, in our university, we're only here for 4 to 6 months at a time. So you can try and close the loop after 4 to 6 months. Equally, you're probably not going to see that much change in that time. So ideally, you'd want to close an audit loop in a year, if not a bit more. But closing an audit loop is also great. So you get data after you've identified the problem and suggested a solution, and then seeing whether it's helped in that sense. Oh, sorry for that question. So that's kind of audits and quips. They're usually the quickest things to do. Honestly speaking, you could probably do an audit in, depending on what it is, you could probably do an audit in 2 weeks. Probably will take a lot, but that's just to open the loop around. It might take a little bit longer depending on what the actual audit that you're looking for is and whether they have the data available really accessibly. But audits are probably the fastest things you can do. So 2 to 6 weeks is kind of the time frame I'd say for an audit. Very, very similar with a quip. Once again, it depends on what you are doing for your quip project. If you want to create an entire app, contacting an app developer, going back and forth can take up to a year. So that might take a bit longer, but equally the time frame is similar in terms of once you figure out what you want to do, contact consultant, the ball does get rolling very quickly. That's the timing of that is just very dependent on the project, which is also very, very self-decided, as I said. So the timelines for that can be as short or as quick as you want. The actual papers, which is, I guess, a lot of people talk about and how to get involved with those. Once again, that's talking to various people on boards or just having various connections. So I've done papers in the past where I've gotten my friends on board and they told me they want to do research. I always ask Phoebe saying, do you want to do one? She always says no. But if she said yes, then I would just put her on one of my projects. So it's also kind of as easy as that. If you see anyone you know, myself included, I will say, unfortunately, I am taking a hiatus from research, so I can no longer do it with anyone because I'm not doing it myself anymore, really. Just kind of taking a break from exams. But it's also really helpful in that sense because if you contact someone who's currently just announced that they've released a paper, unlike me, it's probably likely that they're working on other papers, or at least they know a research team or know someone that they can segue you to and signpost you to help them with research in that sense. There are various parts of research that you can do, in my opinion, and the ones that I do the most, at least, are literature reviews. So that's essentially where you are just scouring internet journals, articles, all about a particular topic and weighing up the pros and cons and just seeing, essentially creating a golden document of all the research and literature out there for a particular issue. We tend to do literature reviews for new upcoming techniques. So for example, frozen elephant trunk, as I said earlier, which is a more up-and-coming technique. So we're constantly wanting new updated literature reviews because instead of reading the 32 articles like I had to, you can just read the one that we produced, which is kind of a summary of all the different devices, all the different mechanisms for that technique. You can also do systematic reviews, meta-analyses, and then also really, really, really importantly is thinking about how you can get other forms of points. So not only audits, quips, and papers and all that good stuff does that give you points, but we also have presentations, so poster presentations, oral presentations and things like that at societies. There are an absolute range of those and they're really nice to get involved in because even if you don't get selected to present your poster or present your presentation, if you go to that event, you'll be in a room full of people, 90% of which do research. So if you're wanting to get into research and there's one happening in your university campus nearby or in a nearby city, if you go to that, there'll be up to 100 people in the room who do a lot of research and would likely be more than happy to have you on their team or take part in an upcoming project with them. So it's just kind of utilising connections and utilising ways that you can get involved in research. And my main emphasis is using initiative and just telling people that you want to get involved with it. But also more importantly, in my opinion, realising that your biggest hurdle as a student and getting into research is probably yourself. So if you just kind of remove the ideology that you don't know enough or things like that. My first paper, I was really scared because I thought I was just going to do it absolutely wrong. But you have editors, you have a whole team, and then now I'm in the process where I'm first author, so I can act as that kind of guide or mentor for people who it's their first papers and things like that. So it's all a learning curve, it's all a learning process. Don't think that you're not good enough. Don't think that you need to be an absolute expert in a field to do research in that field. Find someone who is an expert, go under their wing and learn from them. And remember, my two biggest things is your biggest hurdle is probably yourself, so just give it a go. and also just take initiative and be passionate, and you'll probably just get research opportunities handed to you. Yeah,
Thank you.
I think that's my 2 cents, and I will pass it over to Norris, who's actually a doctor.
Yeah, so you've heard from a student perspective, and now we're going to hear from Norris, who's Dr. Norris, who's a hematology registrar at King's and is also very well involved in research. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you see and hear me well? Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's an excellent talk from Tiffany. I think that she already demonstrates the right sort of traits that we look for in research. My name is Norris. I'm a hematology registrar at King's, and currently I'm in my 3rd year of my PhD, doing gene editing for red blood cell diseases, hence the reason why I'm in the lab. I'm at Imperial, and I do that in collaboration with Oxford University. Some of the key features of my research that I've done, I've just sort of had an accepted Nature paper for a new sort of project that I'm looking at in sickle cell disease and trying to explore sickle cell disease under new environment, because we know that sickle cell disease is sensitive to various changes like low oxygen, high altitudes. So my idea was to look at that in space, and so I just was able to justify new methodologies in space, as well as look at that project of sickle cell in space, and that has been accepted in Nature. I have another Nature paper looking at health inequalities in general. I have a blood paper, which is one of the top hematology journals, as well as British Society of Hematology. I've got first author papers in those ones, and I'm sort of lead co-editor. I sort of initiated the handbook of sickle cell disease, which will be published this year, trying to train health professionals in the management of sickle cell, UK-wide and internationally, due to the health disparities in management of sickle cell disease. So why did I mention all of this? Is not to gloat or anything like that. It's just to try and for you guys to see how did I get to this process. And as I was really happy to hear sort of Tiffany's story, because she was just like me, starting in medical school, which is I'm so very proud of. What happened from my story was that I had family members that were affected by sickle cell disease, and family members and friends as well that were affected by sickle cell disease. So I was very curious as a child as to why some people with sickle cell disease had more severe conditions compared to others. Some will go to hospital more often than others. Then I went into secondary school, and I was really fascinated by the first concepts of genetics. And then it then occurred to me that probably in my increased understanding of genetics could help sickle cell disease. And that was why probably later on I was more interested in laboratory science research as opposed to sort of drug research. Yeah, so I was more basic science, because I always wanted to understand the whys, the underpinnings behind genetics. And fortunately, when I got into medical school, I was at King's College London for medical school, and I think in the 2nd year or 3rd year or something like that, there was a undergraduate studentship that you could do in the lab for 6 weeks, and we had one of the world's professors who was looking at sickle cell disease. She was looking at the key biological determinants of sickle cell disease being fetal hemoglobin. And I just emailed her and applied to see if I could work under her wings in her lab to see if I can start developing some research experiences. I don't know why she took me, but she decided to accept me and see how I was. And that first taste ended up with lots of learning, but lots of hard work. And I think the professor realized that as well as my enthusiasm, I was willing to be sort of tenacious and dedicated with research. And that ended up being a publication in the British Journal of Hematology for somebody else's PhD. I was working with another registrar at the time. I was a medical student, and I was a first co-author with the registrar for the British Journal of Hematology, and that kind of research also helped to change clinical practice as well, and as well as lead to sort of new guidelines for transfusion usage in sickle cell. So that kind of whetted my appetite in research, and I was always on the line of I wanted to kind of have a kind of joint research and clinical training career. I was then able to design. So another key tool was in medical school, you can design special study modules. I don't know what you call them now. They might special study components or whatever they are. There's something one component that's extra curriculum that you can kind of self-design. And so I chose to do it in a sickle related project, and you could design it as Tiffany was alluding to, for meta-analysis, systematic reviews and things like that. So you could design any of those type of topics in your medical school, and you're probably going to have most of the time to do that whilst you're in medical school compared to any other time in your career. So that's a good time to do it. So that's what I did, and I was able to do more research and get further papers from things like that. Then I didn't really kind of, when I went in, it was more of an interest, a curiosity, but then I realized that the outputs I was getting was very good, and then you get to your fourth year, people start mentioning about being competitive for applications, and I realized I wasn't only competitive for F1 applications, but I was actually competitive enough for academic foundation applications as well. So I applied for that, and I was fortunate to get that in London. So I was able to do that in hematology. And I was able to do a small lab project. I mean, it's only 4 months of research time alongside your sort of foundation years. And but that was still crucial, because within those 4 months, especially if you're doing lab work, I was spending time cultivating the skills needed for lab work, because lab work is basic science work is just like going to medical school. It's a whole new different language, so you need to kind of spend time developing that. And so that's what I did for my academic foundation program. And then I thought of an idea. I think I was in London and Brighton, and I'd already sort of learned how to sort of understand fetal hemoglobin. Then I was in Brighton dealing with blood cancer patients, and I said to myself, actually, could we apply the knowledge we've had in fetal hemoglobin to people with blood cancers? Because in Brighton there weren't no sickle patients. I was upset about that, but it turned out to be a blessing, because it allowed me to study another condition, being blood cancers. And so I decided to investigate fetal hemoglobin in blood cancers, which had never been done before. And I was able to be awarded an academic clinical fellowship to do that, which is the second stage. So so you can start applying to things after your academic foundation program. You can, if you're competitive enough, you can apply to academic clinical fellowship, which the key rewards to that is that you can do joint clinical and academic programs. It allows you to stay where you are, whether it's in London or wherever you want to stay. And it gives you sort of run through registrar training, or run through specialist number, even at SHO level, before you've even done your exams. So before I had even done my sort of MRCP exams, I had my specialist number in hematology already. So I was kind of nice in a good place, you know. So so I was able to find, with that project and lab work in blood cancer patients, I was able to find new genes that were important for blood cancers, that were fetal hemoglobin genes, and that was one of the papers that went into Blood as a first author. So as that was with the academic clinical fellowships, they do kind of expect you to, you're starting to get stronger to build yourself up for PhD applications. So in a sense, I'd already had the specialist number. I wanted to apply for PhDs. So I did apply for PhDs at the time, and I applied to MRC for a sickle cell project. I applied to Wellcome for a sickle cell project. The two of the organizations said no. And I think this was back in 2015. And I don't know the reasons why. I felt I was competitive enough, but there's many reasons politically when you're talking about research, what type of research is being funded in the UK. Sometimes at that time, sickle cell wasn't top of the list. Even now, probably it's not still top of the list. So my last grants agency that I applied to was the Fulbright, actually, and I thought, what was the point? Because I felt Fulbright was more competitive than MRC and Wellcome, and so it was just the last ditch that I decided that let me just do it. Just who knows what would happen. Went to the interview, and I didn't think I did anything well. I think for me it was, I think the questions was hard about what I could contribute to going to the States through research. But lo and behold, they decided to award me the Fulbright scholarship for that year in 2016. So I was allowed, so paid for to do research in the US for 1 year. It took my little family then at the time, and I was doing research in the National Institutes of Health, biomedical research, where they do sort of what they call bench to bedside research for sickle cell disease, which is kind of like translating your discoveries into the bedside as well. So there was a lot of fascinating stuff. So all of that kind of built my CV to my PhD now, to be honest, where I do cutting edge gene editing for ribosomal red cell diseases and try to use CRISPR to find genetic mutations, answers to genetic conditions, which I'm enjoying. It's going well there. Obviously with PhD, it's not, I don't want to make it sound like it's a chill. It's heavy lifting, and you have to be committed, you have to be dedicated. But the rewards in the long term are good if you decide if you want to go down that route. It's a lot more of a long-term thing. And I've got 18 more months. I'm in ST5, so I've got 18 more months. When I finish my PhD, I've got 18 more months before I'm a consultant in hematology. So enough about me, and just wanted to leave you with some tips in terms of research, getting into research. And I think Tiffany has really helped to answer this. But it's good to start your research experience earlier, and the earlier the better. These can also be useful experiences for applications and competitive sort of practical reasons of applications as well. And also, as Tiffany was saying, that if you start your research earlier, your experiences earlier, you get a taste of what sort of research you would like in the future, because a lot of people do come to me and ask me, what sort of research should I do, Norris? And if you don't have that sort of initial experience, then you won't know if it's you want to do lab work, you want to do bioinformatics, you want to do clinical research, or you want to do even artificial intelligence that's coming now, for example. Or even decide to not even do research, because that's a sensible decision as well, because doing research is a life commitment, and you've already got enough on your plate being a physician. So training again in research is a big decision in itself. So you have to want to do it. And if you don't want to do it, then it's completely fine. But at least you understand the underpinnings of research. So the second advice I would say is that you really need to identify like supervisors and mentors earlier as well in your research experience, because these relationships are key. I can count on the amount of times that the professors that I worked for, the clinician scientists, the scientists, those ones that did my references, those are the after your sort of input as your project application, the next key thing is your references, and these relationships with these people that you do research with will stand the test of time if it goes well for you. And then if you want to do sort of further research in the future in the form of an MD degree or PhD, then these supervisors will come for you and be helpful for you. And one of the things I was trying to do with the physician scientist, which is one of the non-profits that I started, was trying to get people who were sort of don't have background in research and sort of ethnic minorities, to train them, to give them the skills, but also connect them up with mentors, so that they can be have that sort of background and sort of help in and support in their research trajectories and careers. The third advice I would say is obviously being modern day Nigerians. I think we like shortcuts. We like doing things fast. But research is the opposite to that. Really, it's more like going to the village and cutting down an old Iroko tree or something. You need like perseverance, and sometimes the more high quality the research you're doing, the longer it actually takes. And you can fail. And I mentioned to you just a minute ago that like I didn't get my MRC fellowship, and I didn't get my welcome fellowship at the time, and I felt sad at the time. But these are the things that like helped me build my faith as well, on believing in myself and believing in God that I can do this. So I think you also got to persevere, and you've got to allocate time for research as well. And it's hard to do as a junior doctor, especially if you've got limited research experience. So this one for junior doctors there, I would say you've got to be intentional about carving out research time. If you don't have research and you're now thinking, oh, I need to get research under my belt, then you've really got to be intentional about it and carve that time for research. It might feel a bit painful actually coming out of all the ward work to do it, but that's something you've got to do. And maybe even apply for the joint clinical academic programs you may be competitive enough to apply for. And then the fourth point is like, be humble and bold. Humble enough to know that you don't know much, and you're here to learn, but bold enough and inquisitive enough to sort of, you want to learn new ideas, and you want to sort of bring new ways of doing things. And that's very good. As a researcher, you want to be connecting the dots to bring about new solutions. And the final thing is, have faith, as I said, and research, you're often dealing with an unseen world, uncertainties, even failure. So if you can persist, then great promises can lie ahead. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very, very much. That was very insightful and honestly such a great wealth of experience. We currently don't have any questions in the chat, but I know if people want to ask you questions, feel free to send them in. And do you have any questions?
I was just going to add that a couple of people have, well, one person for sure, has messaged us asking some questions, which I think would be really nicely targeted to Norris, to which I want to say, if you have any questions, a really easy way to get into research would be to sending him a personal email, because as I said, that shows the initiative we were talking about. And I'm sure he would appreciate that initiative and be more than happy to to answer you and give you lots of help. So that's an also easy way to get in, to send him a personal email, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to have a chat with you.
Or on LinkedIn, whatever kind of platform. We're currently now entering the Q&A section. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Ask away. Again, if you maybe, for example, don't feel comfortable, you can send it to one of us directly, or we can put in a moment, we'll put in the group chat invitation and you can join the chat, and then you can direct Phoebe, Tiffany and I the questions, and then we can send them to the necessary people.
Brilliant. But thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and we will answer your questions over the next few minutes.
I think there's just one raised hand there.
Good evening. This is Arde. So thank you for your talk. Well, everyone really. It's been very inspiring. I wanted to ask about you. I think you mentioned the foundation. I didn't hear clearly. So just asking about if one could volunteer to help. I could give more about my background, but that struck a chord with me. The foundation you were mentioning.
Are you talking about the academic foundation program?
No. I think you mentioned something about when you were talking about the physician scientists.
Oh, yes.
About finding mentors for
Yeah,
Or
yeah. So
yeah, you know, widening
yeah,
participation.
yeah, thank you. It's one of the things that I'm been trying to develop is obviously when you're doing sort of high speed research,
Yes.
the kind of non-profit stuff like it goes at 5 miles per hour. But what I've been trying to do is trying to get nurture the new generation of researchers, particularly those from underprivileged backgrounds because um I do think that they have been neglected, and we have a lot of solutions that we could discover in health and beyond. So the future is for the taking. And so one of the things, as well as sort of giving research skills or training research skills, it's also trying to connect. So we would have a network of senior people in research who have
Yes.
been there, done it, and
Yeah.
happy to provide that nurturing, happy to provide that mentorship to people who partake of the physician scientists as well. And it's really trying to, particularly when you're having a joint clinical and academic career, there are nuances, there are things that you have to bear in mind. And so that was the point of the physician scientist. I also, like Tiffany was mentioning, I also try my very best to involve um uh, like our people in my research projects as well, and just get medical students or to do literature reviews and participate in whatever I'm doing, because there is a sort of a disparity in our people doing research, so I try to do that from encouraging them as well. So yeah.
Exactly. So, if is it possible? How do I contact you? Because I would like to find out more about that vision and help
Of
in some
course,
way.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think Tiffany will leave my email address in the chat. I'm also,
Okay.
my LinkedIn is also available as well.
Fantastic. Okay, I'll contact you on LinkedIn if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's all right, pleasure.
Okay. I wanted to invite Ayo and Victor to sort of join the Q&A. I know there haven't been any questions. I didn't introduce myself. So my name is Ivy, one of the anesthetic consultants, and I help to coordinate sort of the student activities. I was hoping that there would be questions from you guys who are students in the audience, but if not, I would just ask one question each to all of you. So Victor, if you're there, um, yep, you're there. There you go. Okay. So Victor was one of our previous student reps for ManSAG. What I wanted to ask is, what were the benefits that you had as a medical student being connected to ManSAG that you found helped your application for F1? I put you on the spot now.
No problem, no problem. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the talk so far. Thank you, Dr. Norris. Even I was taking notes from your talk as well. Thank you for the question. So being involved in ManSAG, so I was involved in my fourth and fifth year of med school. And I think one of the main benefits, I would say, was linking back to actually what Dr. Norris said, was the mentorship scheme that we had running at a point. So I managed to secure a mentorship with one of the senior GPs at ManSAG, Dr. Oge Ilozu. And pretty much all through FY1, we would have regular meetings every few months. You should check up to see how I'm doing, how I'm adjusting to life, in the new roles that I was doing. And even that transition from being a final year med student to being an FY1 doctor, she had such a massive impact on just calming down my nerves and giving really useful tips. One of the main things she'd always tell me is just to always be on the lookout for opportunities, and they will present itself. And you do just need to throw yourself into literally just throw yourself into opportunities and make use of them. So I'd say that's the main thing for me. Definitely, it was having that mentorship. It's not the only thing, however. Other things, it was also just seeing other senior successful doctors that looked like me. You know, it has such a it has it has this aspiring impact where you also feel that you can do all these things. So in my medical school, for instance, I was one of two black doctors, well, two black male doctors in my whole year group. So representation wasn't really there at all. But then going to these Mansa conferences and seeing, you know, consultants of BAME origin, of different specialities, all talking about what they've done, attending physical events as well, and meeting people in person, and it's just so inspiring to hear from them. So I'll leave those two as the main benefits for me.
Okay, thank you. I will come back to you to
No
follow up
problem.
on that. But I just following on from your talk earlier on, I think you're still on there. I hope you still there, Ayo? No, I think he's signed off. Okay. So he kind of mentioned challenges of F1 year. What did you find, Victor, that was maybe the most challenging thing, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah. So for me, I think the biggest challenge was the steep learning curve. When I started FY1, the thing you realize first is that a lot of what you've been taught in med school is a lot is all the extremes of medicine, and now all of a sudden you're dealing with the day-to-day running of the hospital basically. You have to be you have to get comfortable dealing with, the pains and the patient reviews, um um prescribing antiemetics, being cordial to all the members. So it's just having this steep learning curve. I think was probably one of the main challenges. So often when I first started, I started on the deep end, really, on general surgery. But I'm also thankful for the experience because I was working in a team of other doctors, with other FY1 doctors. And so we all kind of learned together and got better together and got faster and more efficient together. So the first few weeks, we would be finishing late, everyone would be stressed, and then we'll be back again the next day to start again. But you do learn so quickly. And now being in FY2 and looking back to my progress in FY1, then now it's turned into a positive thing, looking back, as why the job is so rewarding. You really see your growth from knowing pretty much nothing and now knowing so much, or knowing at least enough to handle yourself and have the confidence, to deal with most situations. So yeah.
Really refreshing to hear that. I could feel my mind going back to my house officer days, which was many songs ago. I think that feeling is unique for everybody. Okay, so Norris, I'm just going to bring you in. If there are no questions, I haven't seen any questions in the chat. We'll just close out with this question. So if you had to look back and think of yourself at medical school, what would be the advice you would give about the next step after this talk tonight of what to do to get on the research ladder?
A great question. I would say don't have fear, actually. Like the things that we sort of maybe fear about, to reach out to particularly seniors or people that these high esteemed people, probably was the thing that was on my mind that time. But looking back, actually, if you are kind of interested, enthusiastic, or at least seem interested or enthusiastic in that person's specialty or niche research field, then they're more likely going to want to hear what you have to say. So reaching out to these people, and that's why when Dr. IB asked me to help out in this type of event, I didn't hesitate to, because sometimes it's about like our seniors trying to help those who are coming up, and we were in that situation before, and and I'm even pleased to hear that the changes for foundation year is even better, because I'm sure when me and Dr. Ivy started, like there wasn't any F1s. You were fully like working, and there wasn't, that support was very limited. You could be alone. On-call shifts were on-call shifts, you know. So I'm pleased that there's progress being made, but it's also still, we got to still support the generations coming up. And so that's why I was keen to attend to this evening as well. Yeah. So I say, be bold, be fearless, go for what's in your heart, actually. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but there was a reason for you, and then keep trying.
Like that. And I think that would also be my advice to every medical student. You will be surprised how far your enthusiasm would go. Just showing up and turning up, that's what that actually means. So be in the room, you know, and be truly interested in the things around you. Your curiosity is what will lead you to research. Your curiosity is what will lead you to investigating potential specialties that you might be interested in. Any comments from Victor or yourself, just to close out, if there's anything else you wanted to say to people out there? No. Okay. All right. I'm going to say a big thank you very much to both of you, and to Ayo for kindly giving your time at short notice as well. So thank you so much. And to everyone who's attended, thank you very much. Do send us any feedback or anything you would like to come on in terms of events, or in terms of things that you would like to be addressed from Manside perspective. So thank you, everybody, and see you all real soon.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.